Beyond the legends. The Mind-Numbing Life of a Viking Farmer Segment 1. Daily Chores. Part 1. The rooster snoozes. But you can't, it's still dark when you wake up. Not the kind of darkness that promises dawn soon. No, this is the thick, heavy sort of dark that hugs your eyelids and tells your body to stay in bed. But your body knows better. Your body has chores. The air in the long house is damp, not quite cold, but colder than it should be. The kind of chill that seeps into your bones and curls around your joints like a lazy cat. You pull the woolen blanket up to your nose and pretend, for a moment, that you didn't hear the faint whine of a goat outside. You almost convince yourself, but then the goat bleats again, longer this time, louder, a bit dramatic. Frankly, you sigh. Loudly, no one answers. Your wife is already up, probably tending to the embers in the hearth or glaring at the pot that's still empty. You sit up slowly, not because you're stiff, but because everything is just a little too heavy. Your legs the floor. The idea of another day, sliding off the wooden sleeping bench. Your feet meet the packed earth with a soft squish. It rained yesterday, and the roof drips. Again. You've been meaning to fix that. You've meant to fix a lot of things. Maybe not. The hearth glows faintly in the middle of the house, a red-orange puddle of dying warmth. Someone has laid kindling near it, your wife, probably, and the dry sticks crackle obligingly when you lean over and blow gently, not too hard. You learned that lesson last spring. Now you coax the fire like an old friend who owes you money. Patiently, grudgingly. Louder. You mumble something unkind about the goat and shuffle toward the door. Your tunic is where you left it, crumpled on the barrel by the entrance, still damp from yesterday's sweat. It smells of smoke and sour milk. You sniff once, shrugged, and pull it over your head. It's not like the goats will complain. They never do. Not about smells. Anyway, the door creaks open with a reluctant groan. The morning greets you like a wet slap. It's not raining anymore, but everything is moist. Fog drapes itself across the yard like a too-thick blanket clinging to the wooden fence. The muddy path and the chickens that stare at you with an accusing glare, as if it est your fault the sun hasn't bothered to rise. You take one step outside and instantly regret it. Mud. Everywhere. Not the dry, crumbly sort of mud. No. This is the clingy kind. The sort that sucks at your boots and then laughs as it splashes up your calves. You curse softly, then louder when you realize your left boot is already leaking. The goat bleats again, dramatically. You consider, briefly, letting it wait. But it's not just one goat. There are 5, and once one starts the morning chorus, the others join in. It's not unlike the local festival choir, except the goats have more rhythm. You shuffle toward the barn, or what you call a barn. Really, it's a lean-to with ambition. 3 slanted posts, a sagging roof, and enough hay to house regret. The goats stare at you through the gaps in the wall. One stamps its hoof impatiently. The same one as yesterday. You reach for the bucket, the one that always has a crack, but never quite leaks. It's filled with yesterday's grain mix, oats, chopped cabbage, and that one moldy apple slice you threw in as a treat. The goats act like it's a royal feast. They shove, bleat, and drool with the kind of enthusiasm that reminds no one has ever told them they re just goats. As you pour the mixture into the trough, one of them headbutts your thigh. You almost drop the bucket. Almost you glare. The goat blinks. You lose, again. You don't remember the first time you were told it was your job to manage it. It was probably slipped into a sentence between "Don't leave the gate open" and "Stop licking icicles off the goat." But here you are, all these years later, with a rake in one hand and a cart in the other, preparing to do what every Viking farmer does with quiet, humble pride. Gather. The barn smells as it always does. Warm, earthy, and powerfully. There's the scent of straw, of course, and the faint sweetness of hay, but mostly it's manure. Layered. Historic. Like sedimentary rock. Only you step into the first stall, the one the sheep frequent. There's a softness to the floor that shouldn't be there. You poke it with the rake. The rake does not bounce back. It sinks slightly, like a shameful ship into a brown sea. You take a deep breath, a mistake, and begin. Scrape, lift, heave, scrape, lift, heave. A rhythm forms, not musical, not poetic, but steady. The dung is collected in piles that steam faintly in the morning cold. You load it into the wooden cart. A wobbly, squeaking contraption that somehow manages to amplify its every joint. It's half full now, or maybe half empty. You choose optimism, though the smell doesn't. From time to time, A sheep wanders by to observe. They're not helpful. They never are. One chews thoughtfully on a rope, another tries to push over a bucket, and a third just stares, glassy-eyed, contemplative, judging your technique. You scrape more. The cart is now full, and your back is making that noise again. Not an actual sound, but a complaint deep in the spine. The same one that whispers every morning. You're not young anymore, followed closely by. You still have to fix that fence again later. You grab the handles and start dragging the cart toward the field's edge, where the compost heap lives. It's not majestic. It's just a lumpy hill of accumulated disappointment and agricultural necessity. The axle creaks. You grunt. Halfway there, a chicken tries to hop onto the pile. You shoo it away with one muddy boot. It squawks, flaps indignantly, and lands on a rock with the air of someone deeply wronged. You arrive. The compost pile is steaming gently, like a giant that forgot to wake up. You tip the cart carefully, slowly. Too fast and you'll end up in it yourself. You learned that lesson 2 winters ago, and your boots never truly recovered. The dung rolls out in clumps and layers, joining its ancestors in the great mound of fertility. Somewhere in this mess is the future of your That thought does not bring comfort. Cart empty. You stand for a moment, hands on hips, breathing through your mouth. You did it. Again. You roll the cart back. The wind shifts. You regret everything. Back at the barn, you rinse the rake in the trough. The water is muddy to start with, but now it's worse. The pig watches you from its pen, snorting softly. It's not judging, just curious, or maybe envious. Pigs have a different relationship with dung. They see it as home. The morning sun has risen just enough to give things color. The mud looks browner, the fence looks more broken, and your tunic has a new pattern. You consider changing it. You decide not to. You head back inside. The longhouse feels warmer now. The fire is crackling confidently, and the pot is bubbling with something that smells almost nice. Your wife is stirring it with the same expression she uses when dealing with relatives. Focused, patient, slightly strained. You sit by the fire, just for a moment. A sigh escapes you. Long, low, and involuntary. Your back agrees. Your knees agree. The dung, however, has not left you. Its aroma clings to you like a loyal dog. The baby gurgles. You're unsure if it's amusement or disgust. Your wife hands you a cloth. You accept it wordlessly and begin wiping your hands. It doesn't help. The rest of the day awaits. You still have to haul wood, check the root cellar, and maybe just maybe scrub the stool where the cow sneezed yesterday. But for now, the cart is empty. The compost is full. And your morning is done. Or must you still have to collect the fresh dung from the other stall? You forgot there were 2 today. Of course. The longhouse has settled into its mid-morning rhythm. Not calm exactly, just predictable. The fire crackles with enthusiasm. Unaware of the dullness, it tries to cheer. The baby, having recently discovered his own feet, is now chewing on one of them. Your wife hums a half-tune while stirring a pot of stew that has the color and consistency of yesterday's stew, because it is yesterday's stew. You know what time it is. Time for the second worst part of the day. Water that must be fetched from the stream, a fair walk beyond the edge of the field, past the thorny shrubs and the inexplicably aggressive goose that guards the halfway point like some sort of feathery troll. You've negotiated with the goose before. It does not respond to reason. You reach for the water pail. It's heavier than you remember. Always heavier when empty. You check the bottom still leaking. Of course. You wrap a cloth around it to slow the dribble. Temporary solutions. Permanent problems. The door creaks as you step outside again. The sun is higher now, but you wouldn't call it warm. The breeze cuts sideways across the fields, tugging at your sleeves and reminding you that summer in the north is more of a polite suggestion than a promise. The mud from earlier has become stickier, thicker. It clings to your boots like it wants a ride. The chickens follow you for a few steps, curious, disappointed, and slightly offended that you are not carrying more grain. You trudge down the worn footpath. It winds around the vegetable patch, mostly weeds right now, and past the woodpile, which is somehow always either too low or too wet. Your hand grazes the top of a broken fence post as you pass. Still needs fixing. Still not fixed. Ahead you see the goose. It stands exactly where it always does, neck outstretched, eyes narrowed, like a guard in a bad mood. You pretend not to see it. It pretends to not be insulted by your existence. As you approach, it hisses once. You bow slightly, not out of respect, but because you're considering using your body as a shield if it charges it lets you pass. You make it to the stream without incident. The stream babbles softly, gently nudging rocks and leaves downstream in a dance that hasn't changed in generations. You squat by the edge, dipping the pail carefully into the water. Cold rushes up your arm as it spills over the rim. Your fingers ache instantly, the kind of ache that feels like your bones are protesting. Loudly, you lift the bucket slowly. Water sloshes, and your tunic absorbs a generous splash. You don't flinch. What's one more wet patch? The walk back is slower. The weight of the water changes your posture, pulling your spine into a shape that would confuse a physician and offend a goat. The goose watches you again. This time it doesn't move. You still walk in a wide circle. Back at the longhouse, you set the bucket by the hearth. You stretch your back. It doesn't help. You sit. The baby has fallen asleep on a bundle of straw, face down, one sock missing. You don't ask where it went. You know better. Your wife dips a ladle into the water, sniffs it, nods. It's acceptable. You've passed the unspoken test. Again. Lunch is a flatbread, just one. From the stack made 2 days ago, it's round, vaguely cracked at the edges. Your wife hands it to you like an offering, and you receive it like a priest receiving a holy relic. You bite, it resists. You chew, it continues to resist. You eventually win, barely. There is no butter. There is no honey. There is no cheese. There is just bread and chewing. Lots of chewing. The stew is ladled into a wooden bowl. It's thick, hot, and faintly metallic from the pot. There are chunks of something. Potato, maybe turnip, possibly carrot. You ask no questions. You eat slowly. A fly lands on the edge of the bowl. You flick it away. It comes back. You share the stew, begrudgingly. After the meal, you carry your bowl to the bucket and rinse it with a single careful splash. Waste not. That water is needed. For the pot, for washing, for tomorrow. It's always needed. Your wife sits across from you, eyes closed. Still, the fire dances on her face. The stew pot simmers softly. Somewhere outside, the goat bleats. Again, you think about the rest of the day. The woodpile still needs splitting. The trap near the chicken coop needs checking. Your daughter said she saw a fox. She also said she saw a troll. Hard to say which is more pressing. You glance at the corner of the longhouse where your tools rest. The axe, the hatchet, the fishing net that hasn't caught anything since mid. You consider pretending you didn't see them. But your wife opens one eye and raises an eyebrow. You sigh, stand, stretch, your knees pop like dry twigs. The bucket still leaks. But for now, the fire is warm. The stew is heavy in your belly. And the flatbread has finally softened. In your stomach at least. You step outside again. Back into the wind. Back into the chores. Back into the slow, endless rhythm of Viking life. Where the battles are rare, but the cold water is forever. The wind has shifted. Now it's in your face. Your eyes narrow to slits. Your nose is a lump. Your fingers are numb, despite the mittens. Your knees feel like someone else's. Back inside the longhouse, the air is thicker, warmer, smoky. The fire has grown. The stew pot is bubbling faintly, water, barley, and a few scraps of something that might have once been meat, or parsnip. It's hard to tell. You sit by the fire, stare into it, let the warmth seep in. The baby is still sleeping. Wrapped in so many layers he resembles a bag of flour with a face. He stirs once, sighs, and falls still again. Your wife offers you a bowl of stew. You accept it without a word. You sip. It burns your tongue. You're grateful. Pain means feeling. Feeling means warmth. You eat slowly. Each bite is the same. That is a comfort. You'll fetch wood later. If the wind dies down, if your fingers stop aching, if the sun, or what passes for it, climbs high enough to soften the ground a little. But probably not. Still, the fire burns. The snow falls, and the blanket, woolly, inadequate, scratchy, waits on your bench, ready to welcome your frozen knees back into its barely tolerable embrace tonight. Winter has begun, and it will not end quickly. The days blur. When the wind howls too long and the snow stacks itself like stubborn thoughts against the door, you stop counting days. You stop pretending time is still behaving normally. Instead, you measure life by the number of times someone sighs in the longhouse. So far today 6. The fire is still burning. Barely it's hungry. Always hungry. Like the goats. Like the baby. Like your own thoughts, gnawing on themselves in quiet circles. There is no outside today. The sky is too low. The snow too high. You know this not from looking out the door because you haven. T-but by the strange grey light pressing against the window cloth. Dim, directionless, flat. the light of being stuck. Your wife paces slowly, for no reason. She folds the same cloth again, refolds it, adjusts the folds, places it down, stares at it, walks away. You watch her do this. Twice. Your daughter sits by the wall, stitching something into nothing. The thread broke 3 times. The pattern never made sense. She claims it will be a scarf. You do not question this. You simply nod. The stew pot bubbles. Again, it always bubbles. You are starting to wonder if it's been bubbling since last spring. The taste never changes. Barley, maybe onion, sometimes a hard bit that could be root or bone. You don't ask. The baby is not crying. He is awake, however, and chewing on a carved wooden pig. It used to be your favorite spoon. Now it has legs. You watched him discover it yesterday. Or was it the day before? Time folds in a cold. You try to count how many steps it takes to cross the longhouse. 7, if you stretch them. 9, if you're slow. 12, if you pretend to forget why you're walking and start again. You've done all 3 today. Your neighbor visited last week, or possibly the week before that. He brought pickled something. You ate it gratefully. You thanked him. You haven't seen him since. Perhaps beyond the legends, the mind-numbing life of a Viking farmer Sigimen. 2, harsh winters. Breath, and the betrayal of snow. Winter doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in gradually, like a thought you try to ignore. A chill in the floorboards, a longer wait for the morning fire to catch. A breath that turns to mist before you even realize you've exhaled. It's not just cold, it's the kind of cold that presses into your ribs and unspools slowly through your arms. The kind that clings, not like rain or snow, but like silence. Heavier than ice. Older than the hearth. You're awake, but only barely. Somewhere behind you, the wind rattles the slats of the longhouse like an impatient guest. The fire has died down again. Just orange crumbs in a grey nest of ash. The kindling basket is nearly empty, and the logs stacked beside it are still damp. Again, you reach for the blanket. It's rough wool, patched twice over with pieces of tunic, goat hide, and hope. It does not reach your feet, it never has. You tug it higher, curl tighter, and breathe through your nose. The air bites. Your wife turns beside you. You don't speak. No one does before the fire's lit. There are rules. With one hand, you grope for the flint and steel. Your fingers are stiff, more bone than flesh, and you fumble. Sparks fly. Miss. Try again. A third strike. A fourth. The fire pit remains stubbornly black. You stop. Exhale. Try again. Spark. Spark. A flicker. The flame catches on the corner of a dry reed bundle. It stutters, then flares. You cup it with your palm and blow gently, feeding it with air and quiet desperation. It lives. You feed it more. Bits of bark, dry twigs, the corner of an old straw mat. The fire begins to speak tiny pops, small cracks, a sleepy murmur. Light returns to the longhouse in shades of orange and shadow. Your wife rises, wraps a shawl around her shoulders, and shuffles toward the stew pot. There's nothing in it, not yet. But she lifts the lid and peers inside anyway, as if the cold might have left something edible behind in the night. You sit upright, slowly, carefully. Your joints complain. Your back stages a protest. You ignore them both. Outside, it is snowing, not heavily, not the romantic kind of snow that settles like a blanket. No, this is the wind-driven kind. It flies sideways, cuts across the landscape in sharp flurries, each flake a whisper of malice. You've seen worse. You'll see worse again. The cow hasn't moved yet. That's unusual. The goats are silent, huddled in their shelter like villagers in a bad dream. The chickens are just confused. As always, you stand, your feet hit the floor with a squelch. Someone tracked in melted snow last night. Probably you. You don't remember. The days blur in winter, the nights even more. You dress in layers, tunic, overshirt, woolen wrap, second tunic, third wrap. You fasten your boots and wrap a strip of cloth around your ears. Your hat vanished sometime in early fall. You suspect the dog. The door groans when opened. Snow pushes in immediately, as if waiting for the invitation. It covers the doorstep like it's claiming new territory. You kick some of it aside and step out. The wind greets you with a slap. Your eyes, water. Not from emotion, just exposure. The cold peels away your thoughts, leaving only the task. The chore. The next thing to do. You trudge toward the barn. Each step is work. The snow isn't deep, but it's packed. Slippery. Untrustworthy. Beneath it, ice. rock, or a forgotten hoe. You step carefully. Inside the barn, it's warmer. Not warm, just warmer. There's breath in the air. Animal breath. Your own breath. A fog of survival. The cow lifts her head slowly. Her nostrils puff steam. Her eyes are resigned. You speak to her softly. Not words, just sound. She flicks an ear. You check her water trough icy. Of course, you break the surface with a stick and scoop out the larger shards. The water beneath is freezing but liquid. Barely you toss her a bundle of hay. She'll choose it slowly, like it might fight back. The goats are huddled in the corner, beneath the loft. They rise when they see you, one bleats. It's not a complaint, it's just a note, a sound to fill the barn's quiet. You feed them to check the fence inside. No gaps. That's something. You step back outside. Snow swallowed him whole. Or perhaps he simply didn't want to walk the 12 steps in his own longhouse anymore. Your thoughts are too loud. You'll try to quiet them by sweeping. There is nothing to sweep. The floor is packed dirt, covered in red matting that's been frozen and unfrozen too many times. Still, you sweep. The dog watches you from the corner. He has not barked in 3 days. He is conserving energy. You suspect he has become wiser than all of you. Your wife speaks. A single word. Rise. Step outside. The cold hits you like a forgotten memory. The woodpile is buried. Of course it is. You dig with your hands. Fingers numb in seconds. Pull out damp logs. Not good ones, but logs nonetheless. Enough to survive another night. Probably. Back inside. You place the logs beside the fire. Your daughter leans closer, as if their mere presence might bring warmth. She does not thank you, but she exhales, which is close enough. You stare into the flames. They flicker in patterns you think you recognize. A man on a horse. A bird. The face of your grandfather. The stew pot. You blink. The patterns are gone. The fire is just fire again. The cabin groans as the wind shifts direction. Snow dust falls from the thatch roof like dandruff from a board guard. Your wife hums again. Not a song, just a sound. It fades halfway through. You reach for your flatbread. It's harder than yesterday. You chew anyway. The baby drops the pig. It rolls into the shadows. He begins to whimper. You retrieve it without thinking. You don't remember standing. You just remember the silence that follows once the pig is back in his arms. You sit. Someone sneezes. No one acknowledges it. There's nothing to be done about sneezing. The candle is low. The stew is lower. The fire crackles a warning. It wants more wood. You give it one of the damp logs. It spits in response. It will burn eventually. Everything does. You remember a story your father told, about a winter when the door froze shut, and the stew turned to jelly, about how they sang to stay sane. You consider singing, then decide against it. There are no songs for this kind of day. Just fire, just breath, just waiting. And maybe, later, if the wind stops moaning through the eve, you'll count the steps across the longhouse again. 7. Just to remind yourself you still can. There is a particular kind of silence that only arrives in winter. It's not peaceful, not holy or poetic. It's the kind of silence that fills, cracks, settles into corners, and pushes you ever so gently toward madness. Today begins with that silence. No rooster, no goat, not even the mutterings of your wife, who is usually already clattering around by this hour, performing the sacred rite of waking the stew. Even the fire seems hesitant, burning, yes, but quieter than usual, like it, too, is conserving its voice. You pull the blanket higher around your shoulders. It does nothing. The chill lives in your joints now, a dull ache in the knees, a whisper in the knuckles. You don't speak of it. Everyone feels it. No one says it. You rise slowly. The bench creaks under you. Your foot touches the floor and recoils. The earth has gone hard. Frozen. Again. The mat beneath your feet is brittle now, as if woven from frost itself. A single drop of melted snow hits the dirt floor, followed by another, and another. A leak. From the roof. In winter, the betrayal is total. You fetch the bucket without speaking. You place it beneath the leak with the solemnity of a burial rite. You consider stuffing the gap with cloth, with straw, with anything. But you don't, because, the snow will melt where it wants, when it wants. The roof will answer only to spring. Still, you glare upward. The ceiling ignores you. You sit by the fire again. Your wife stirs, opens one eye, sees the bucket, closes the eye again. Nothing more needs to be said. Later, you discover the sled is broken. You don't use the sled often, but when you do, you expect it to be whole. Now, one of the runners has cracked clean through, a splintered wound in the wood. You don't know when it happened. You don't ask how. You simply exhale. Repairs require tools. Tools require fingers. Your fingers are stiff, clumsy, unwilling. Still, you try. You squat beside the sled and tie rope around the brake. The rope phrase. You curse, quietly, like a man trying not to wake the dead. Eventually, the sled holds. Barely you test it. It squeaks, groans, but it moves. That's enough. You set it aside and inspect the firewood. Lo, again, you pull on your cloak, your hat, your mittens. You push open the door and step into the world. It pushes back. The wind today is sharp, flaying what little skin is exposed. Your eyes water instantly. You blink the tears away and trudge toward the woodpile. Except it's no longer a pile. It's a lump, a frozen mound of regrets. You dig at it with a stick. The top layer is ice. Beneath that, frozen bark. Beneath that, wood that might burn, if it ever remembers how. You dig more. You retrieve 3 pieces. That's it. Your fingers no longer feel the cold. That is not comfort. That is warning. Back inside, the stew is bubbling again. Of course it is. Your wife drops a bone into the pot. You don't ask what kind. You sit by the fire and hold your hands near it, trying to remember what warmth felt like. The door creaks. It shouldn't. You both turn. Standing there is the neighbor's boy. Red-faced, runny-nosed. He says nothing for a moment, then mutters, "The goat broke in again." You sigh. That goat. Always that goat. You stand, pull your cloak back on, step into the cold again, following the boy across the field. The neighbor's goat is in your shed. Again, eating something it shouldn't. Again, you wave your arms. It bleats. You dodge it. Escapes. The boy laughs. You don't. You return to your longhouse, sit back by the fire, remove your boots. One is damp inside. You do not investigate why. You simply place it by the fire and glare at it. The boot remains smugly silent. Another drip from the ceiling. You move the bucket slightly. It makes a hollow thunk. The dog lifts its head, looks at you, then lowers it again. The stew is ready. You eat. It tastes like yesterday, and the day before, and the day before that. But it is hot, and that is something. The door creaks again. The wind howls. The roof drips. The sled is broken. The firewood is wet. The goat is plotting. You chew your stew slowly, and remind yourself, this is only the beginning of winter. You dream of green. Not gold, not conquest, not thunderous guards or roaring longships. Just ... green. A patch of moss on a dry stone. The tender sprout of a weed between 2 thawed footprints. The curl of a dandelion leaf too stubborn to wait for the frost to leave completely. You dream of green. And soup. Not this soup. Not the one that lives permanently in the pot above your hearth, slowly digesting itself into a gray, flavorless paste. No. You dream of soup that tastes like something. Something sharp. Something sweet. Something that doesn't begin and end with barley and regret. You dream of turnip soup. Spring turnip soup. The turnips you grow in spring are smaller, less bitter, and sometimes, if the soil is feeling generous, vaguely tender. The kind of turnip you can chew without closing one eye and praying. The kind of turnip that doesn't judge you for being poor and tired and eating turnips again. But spring is far away, so you sit by the fire. The soup bubbles. The dog snores. The bucket beneath the roof leak fills slowly with a rhythm that might have been music, if it weren't also misery. Your wife is sewing, not because anything needs sewing, but because there's nothing else to do. The fabric is the same old linen from last summer's shift. Now it's becoming something else. A rag, a pouch, a handkerchief for a neighbor who will pretend to be grateful. Your daughter is carving something. A stick, a spoon, a flute that won't play. She's humming the same tune she's hummed for 3 weeks. You no longer hear it consciously. It has become part of the walls. You rise to check the root cellar, not because you expect anything new, but because it's something to do. The hatch is frozen. Of course, you stomp it. It thuds. You stomp again. Something cracks. Probably the hinge. Probably your patience. You manage to open it. Inside, the air is somehow colder than the air outside. You descend the ladder, step into the darkness. It smells like old earth and lost ambition. You strike a flint. The flicker of light reveals the truth. 3 turnips, 2 wrinkled potatoes, 1 onion soft on one side and defiant on the other. You carry them up like treasures, back by the hearth. Your wife looks at them, nods. She slices the onion, peels the potatoes, and places the turnips gently into the pot, like it's a ceremony that you think it should be. The first fresh turnip of winter deserves reverence. The baby is asleep. He's using the dog's flank as a pillow. The dog does not mind. The baby drools. The dog twitches. You eat the soup slowly. It's different now. Slightly. Maybe it's the turnip. Maybe it's the idea of the turnip. Maybe it's hope. You chew. You think of spring again. You think of the fields turning soft, of the snow melting into rivulets that sneak between your boots and soak your socks, of pulling weeds with bare hands, of turning soil that smells alive. You think of green again. Not much, just enough. Outside, the snow continues to fall. Inside, the soup simmers. The fire is low, but alive. You wrap the blanket tighter around your shoulders. Your daughter has fallen asleep with a carving in her lap. It's now a shape, but not yet a thing. You don't wake her. She can finish dreaming it. Your wife stands and checks the bucket. It's nearly full. She sighs, pours it out the door. Snow blows in, swirls once, then retreats. The longhouse creaks. The dog snores. The soup bubbles. And you, Viking farmer and frozen-footed dreamer of weeds, sit by the fire and taste, for the first time in weeks, something almost like a beginning. It is not spring, but it might be the idea of it, and that is enough. Beyond the legends. The Mind-Numbing Life of a Viking Farmer Segment 3. Family Drama 1. The passive-aggressive saga of Brother Ivar. No swords were drawn. No voices raised. No blood spilled. Unless you count the goose bite, that probably wasn't related. But the tension in the longhouse this morning could sour cream at 10 paces. It started as it often does, with the goat. Brother Ivar fed it first. That wouldn't have mattered, except you were planning to feed it. You had the bucket in your hand. The grain was measured. The routine was clear. But Ivar stepped in, uninvited and overenthusiastic, cooing at the goat like it was a newborn prince, and scattered the grain before you could even say more. You said it anyway. He said nothing. That's how it begins. You're both grown men. You both have calloused hands and knees that creak like old doors. You've each held an axe, shot a mule, and once, long ago, helped pull a cart out of a bog together without speaking for 3 hours. You've thought that meant something. But now, every movement feels loaded. He hangs his cloak on the wrong peg. He sharpens his knife too loudly. He stirs the soup counterclockwise. He feeds the goat first. You say nothing, because that's the tradition. Your wife notices. She doesn't say anything either. Instead, she hands you your cup of morning broth, 2 inches closer to you than usual, a silent show of solidarity. You nod. She nods. Brother Ivar does not nod. He bites into a piece of flatbread with a kind of deliberate effort that implies betrayal. It cracks. Loudly. The baby stares at him. Even the baby knows something is off. You go outside to chop wood, not because it needs chopping, though it always does, but because the air inside is starting to taste like unspoken accusations and burnt onions. The cold bites at your nose, but you welcome it. You split a log, then another. You imagine each log is a petty grievance. The time he took your sheepskin boots without asking. The time he accidentally fed the dog your last smoked fish. The time he told the neighbors your fence post leaned like a drunk sailor. Crack, split, stack. The pile grows. So does your sense of calm, until you hear the door open behind you. He steps out. Need help? He asks. You grunt. Not a yes. Not a no. He picks up a log. His is wetter than yours. Of course. He tries to split it. Misses. Hits again. Splinters fly. You don't look. He keeps going, in silence, for 20 minutes. Then, just before going back in, he says, "The goat likes being fed early." You stop. The axe hangs in mid. You turn, slowly. He's not looking at you. He's brushing snow off his tunic. But he knows, you know. The trees know. You lower the axe. That night, he takes the last bowl of stew without offering it to you. Your wife notices. She ladles you some from the bottom of the pot. It's mostly onion and something that might have once been turnip. You eat it anyway. He doesn't say goodnight. You don't say sleep well. Your wife says both. Twice. In bed, you stare at the rafters. Brother Ivor snores faintly from across the room. The fire hisses, the roof drips. The dog growls in its sleep. In the dark, you wonder what started this quiet war of sighs and sideways glances and slightly too hard door closings. You remember the goat, you remember the boots, you remember the way he always gets to stir the stew first. And you remember that you are brothers, which means neither of you will ever admit defeat, and neither of you will ever leave. You didn't invite her. You didn't not invite her, either. That's how these things work. One day your wife says her cousin from up the fjord is visiting, just for a week, just until her husband finishes repairing the roof, or the boat, or his sense of responsibility. The details shift, like fog. You nod, because that's what husbands do, especially Viking ones. You prepare a place near the hearth, not too close, but not too far, either. A fresh straw mat, a clean blanket, a bowl with no cracks. Hospitality matters. She arrives with 3 bundles, 2 opinions, and 1 immediately loud voice. Her name is Thyra, but you now think of her only as the noise. She walks like she owns the longhouse. She speaks like she's paid to fill every silence. She criticizes the stew before she even sits down. Did you burn the onions? She asks. You didn't. The onions were born that way. She compares everything. Oh, our longhouse has a loft. So much easier for storing cheese. We never leave tools near the door. Too drafty. Your dog looks smaller than ours. Is it a runt? You don't answer. You chew your stew. Very slowly. Your wife doesn't defend the stew. She doesn't defend the house. She doesn't need to. Instead, she hands you a piece of flatbread so thick it could be a weapon. A quiet act of partnership. You snap off a corner like a man biting through tension. Thyra hums loudly, tunelessly. While she eats, you stare into the fire and imagine being a monk. The week passes, except it doesn't, it stretches. Time under one roof with Thyra is different. Hours become taffy. Meals last decades. Even the dog looks older now. She insists on helping. You say, that's kind of you. She doesn't hear the button, not necessary. She reorganizes the grain sacks. You can no longer find anything. She rewinds the fishing lines. They now tangle on sight. She mends a tunic that did not need mend. It now fits your cousin instead of you. She even sings, at dawn, at full volume, songs you don't know, songs you wish you'd never heard, songs about real Viking men who catch fish with their hands and tame wild reindeer. You wonder if her husband ever fixed that roof. You suspect he may still be hiding beneath it. The baby cries more, probably sensing the imbalance, or maybe reacting to Thyra's perfume, which smells like pine and superiority. Your brother Ivor says nothing, but he smiles every time she critiques your fence. He is enjoying this. You resolve to speak up, one day, maybe tomorrow. But tomorrow comes, and Thyra is already up, already stirring the pot, already suggesting that a pinch of dried mushroom would give it a fuller mouthfeel. You do not know what a mouthfeel is. You no longer care. You spend more time outside, chopping wood, fetching snow, inspecting nothing in particular, just walking, slowly, away. She's still there when you return. She always is. One night, the baby throws up. Thyra suggests it's your wife's broth. Your wife suggests she not speak for 5 minutes. It's the most glorious silence you've ever known. But even then, she only manages 3. Then she's humming again. At dinner, she mentions her cousin's husband again. You ask, softly, how long did he say he needed to fix the roof? She looks at you and says, oh, it's not the roof. He just needed space. You nod. The baby cries. The fire cracks. The stew burns. Slightly. Thyra hums louder. You chew your flatbread, hard, and dream, not of raids, not of spring, but of the day she finally says goodbye. It's not just a sock. At least, that's what you tell yourself. At first it was easy to dismiss. A single woolen foot cover gone missing in a house full of straw, children, and distractions. The kind of thing that happens, that gets lost, misplaced, folded into a tunic, hidden under the bench. Except it doesn't turn up. Not the next morning, not the one after. And now, it's been 5 days. The sock is gone, and the longhouse knows it. It was the left one, grey, with the faded red loop your wife stitched at the top last winter. A small thing, Warm. Reliable. You wore it during chores. During meals. Even sometimes to bed when the floor froze. It was a good sock. A humble sock. Gone. You've searched, of course. Beneath the straw mattress. Behind the stew pot. Under the baby. The baby bit you for that one. You've shaken out cloaks. Turned over baskets. Even interrogated the dog with a very long stare. He stared back. Unapologetic. You asked your wife. She raised an eyebrow. Have you checked the bench? You had twice? You say nothing? She resumed stirring the soup. Brother Ivor makes a sound in the back of his throat. The kind of noise that might be a cough or might be a judgment. You ignore it. Thyra's still here, still humming. Glances down at her feet. She is wearing socks. Mismatched socks. You pause. She sees you. She smiles. You go outside to breathe. The cold doesn't bite as hard when you're focused on justice, or vengeance, or simply finding the one thing that made your feet not hate you. You think back to the last time you wore it. You'd been hauling firewood. Came inside. Took off your boots. Removed both socks. You think, did you? You go to the woodpile. Check between the logs, nothing. You go to the goat pen. They stare at you, chewing slowly. One of them burps. You back away. You go to the barn. The sled. The fishing net. The empty water barrow. Nothing. By nightfall, the silence is heavy again, and the sock is still missing. You eat your stew in quiet. Brother Ivor clears his throat. Cold out there, he says. You nod, your feet warm enough. He adds. You stare at him, but you feel it. Thyra, humming, lifts her right foot. The sock has a red loop. She says nothing. Neither do you. Your wife notes. She says, softly, some things find their way back on their own. You nod. Not because you agree, but because you are too tired to argue. That night, you lie in bed with one sock on. It doesn't feel right. Your foot is warm, but your pride is cold. Somewhere, someone is probably wearing a sock, but you close your eyes anyway, and dream not of battles, not of turnips, not even of green. You dream of that sock, folded neatly, sitting by the fire, waiting for you, like it used to. You have milked goats. You have hauled water. You have mended fences in the snow, wrestled sacks of grain up frozen slopes, and once removed a splinter the size of a fishbone from your own hand, using only a knife and your teeth. None of that prepared you for this. The baby will not sleep. Not tonight. Not last night. Not really any night recently. And not in the sense of a soft whimper and a little fussing. No. This is a full-body protest against existence. He is wrapped, warm, fed. The fire glows. The longhouse is quiet. And still, Your wife notices. She says, softly, some things find their way back on their own. You nod. Not because you agree, but because you are too tired to argue. That night, you lie in bed with one sock on. It doesn't feel right. Your foot is warm, but your pride is cold. Somewhere, someone is probably wearing your sock, but you close your eyes anyway, and dream not of battles, not of turnips, not even of green. You dream of that sock, folded neatly, sitting by the fire, waiting for you, like it used to. You have milked goats. You have hauled water. You have mended fences in the snow, wrestled sacks of grain up frozen slopes, and once removed a splinter the size of a fishbone from your own hand, using only a knife and your teeth. None of that prepared you for this. The baby will not sleep. Not tonight. Not last night. Not really any night recently. And not in the sense of a soft whimper and a little fussing. No. This is a full-body protest against existence. He is wrapped, warm, fed. The fire glows. The longhouse is quiet, and, still, Your wife paces slowly, her back arched, arms curved like a cradle. The baby is nestled in the crook of her elbow, crying like he's been wronged by fate itself. She bounces slightly on each step. The floor creaks in time. You've taken your turn already. 3 turns, in fact, and now you sit on the bench with a blank stare and a wooden spoon still in your hand. It was meant to stir the stew. You're no longer sure how long you've been holding it. Brother Ivor is pretending to be asleep. You know this because his breathing is too steady, too perfect. You suspect he is reliving that time. He won the foot race at the Harvest Festival 10 years ago. You hate him a little. Thyra, blessedly, is not here tonight. She went to visit her brother just for a few days. The silence she left behind is not quite soothing, but at least it doesn't hum. The baby shrieks. It's not the hungry cry, not the wet cry. You've dealt with those. This is something deeper, existential. The "I don't like being alive in this moment" cry. Your wife shifts him to her other hip. The crying increases. She tries humming the old lullaby. It works for one verse. Then he shrieks louder, as if offended by the melody. You take the baby? He resists. You rock him side to side, gently like swaying seaweed in a cold tide. You hum, too. Not a song, low, rumbling, like a distant storm, or your own thoughts. It helps, for 12 seconds. Then, your wife sighs, long and tired. Not angry, not frustrated. You both sit, staring into the fire. The baby still howling. You try the trick, the one your mother swore by. Lay the baby face down across your forearm, head in your palm, legs dangling. He stops crying. You freeze. Your wife stares. Hope flickers. Then, he sneezes, shudders, and lets loose a scream, so loud the dog actually lifts his head. You switch arms. Nothing. You hand him back. He burps. You blink. Your wife smells his neck. Still clean. She mutters. You both stare at the stew pot. You wonder if the steam could be turned into a lullaby. You wonder if turnip vapor has calming properties. He finally begins to slow. Hiccups. Whimpers. Tiny snorts. Then, without warning, sleep. His mouth hangs open just slightly, as if, even in slumber, he has questions. Your wife lays him gently on the mat near the hearth. He does not stir. You both sit back down, cautiously. The longhouse is still. The fire is low. Your spoon is still in your hand. You drop it. The sound is deafening. The baby twitches. You both hold your breath. He sighs. Rolls over. Sinks deeper. You exhale. The dog snores again. Brother Ivor rolls over loudly, as if to remind you he's a person with opinions. You lie back on the bench. Your eyes close. And as the fire crackles and the wind nudges the walls, you drift off. Not to dreams of war. Not of glory. Not even of socks. You sleep with only one thought. He's asleep, and for now, that's enough. Nothing too grand. A fight with a boar that turned out to be a shadow. A journey to trade for barley that mostly involved falling into a bog and meeting a woman who could spit farther than any man you've met. Your daughter liked that one. You wonder if she'll remember it. You wonder if she one day tell it to her own children, adding extra details, making you taller, your axe sharper, the bog deeper, and maybe she'll say you fought in a raid, and maybe she believe it. The stew boils over slightly. Your wife curses, just once. Softly, lovingly. The dog lifts his head, then goes back to sleep. Brother Ivor hums a bit of an old tune, the kind sung at feasts by men who've never seen battle but dream of it while snoring. The fire flickers on the sword above the hearth, the sword that has never drawn blood, but always draws eyes. You close yours, and dream not of battle, but of stories, of sagas spun from nothing, of heroism imagined, of glory passed around like stale bread. It is enough. It begins with a scream. Not a human scream. Not quite. More of a shriek, raw, high-pitched, indignant. You leap up from the bench, stew sloshing over the edge of your bowl. The baby startles. The dog growls. Your wife looks up, already halfway to the door. Another scream. Then clucking. Then chaos. You run outside, half-dressed, breath puffing in clouds before you. The snow crunches under your feet. You round the corner. The chicken coop is under siege by your rooster. He's flapping like a lunatic, his wings slashing the air like blunted blades. The hens are scattering, squawking, stumbling over each other like feathered drunks. One has taken cover behind the grain barrel. Another runs in circles like it's trying to summon help from the gods. And in the middle of it all, the goat, standing proudly atop the chicken roost, eyes wild, nostrils flared, beard swaying like he's leading a charge into battle. He has no idea why he's there, but he is victorious. You stand, frozen, not from the cold, though it bites, but from the sheer absurdity. Then you move. First, the hens. Herding them is impossible. You flap your arms, make shooing sounds, step gently. But they dart and scatter like thrown grain. One leaps onto your shoulder. You yelp. She flaps away. You hear Brother Ivor laugh from the doorway. He retreats indoors. Next, the goat. You step cautiously toward him, hands raised in peace. He snorts, lowers his head. You remember the time he knocked over the sled, the time he ate your leather glove. The time he stared at you through the window while chewing something you were still convinced was your tax scroll. You take another step. You charge us. You jump aside, landing in a snowdrift. He gallops past you, proud as a king, hooves flinging straw and feathers behind him. The rooster screams again. You think you hear the dog barking now. Not in alarm, just in derision. You crawl out of the snow, covered in hay, dignity dripping from your sleeves. You grab the broom. This means war. Back inside the coop, feathers float like battlefield smoke. The goat is circling back, looking for higher ground. The rooster is now perched on the fence, shouting encouragement or warnings. You're not sure which. You swing the broom. You miss. You swing again. Contact, not with the goat, with a bucket, which topples dramatically and spills something you were hoping to forget was in there. The goat rears. Your wife appears at the corner of the coop, hands on hips, an expression that says, "Really?" You lunge, your arms catch the goat's midsection. He bellows. You grunt. Together, you tumble to the ground. There is snow. There is flailing. There is the rooster flapping over your heads like a tiny, panicked Valkyrie. And then, silence. You sit up, breathless, victorious. The goat is still, not in defeat, just bored. He begins chewing your sleeve. Your wife nods. "Good," she says. "Now fix the fence." You look over. The fence is shattered. One post snapped. The rails splintered. The rooster surveys it like a general surveying the field of a hard-won battle. You sigh. You gather the hens, one by one. They glare at you as if the whole thing was your fault. You mutter apologies. You don't mean them. The rooster refuses to return to the coop. You do not fight him. You respect his courage and his beak. The goat is led back to the shed, still chewing your sleeve. You let him. It's not your favorite. The fence is repaired badly, temporarily. As always. Back inside, the fire is warm. Your wife hands you dry clothes. The baby's asleep again. Brother Ivor says nothing, but you notice he's smirking behind his cup. Thyra, who has unfortunately returned, raises an eyebrow and says, "Everything all right?" You nod, because that's the only answer. You sit. You eat what's left of your stew. You pull a feather from your collar and flick it into the fire. You glance at your axe, still hanging by the door. You smile, because today, you went to battle, and you survived. Beyond the legends. The mind-numbing life of a Viking farmer for when raids were just rumors. Part 1. The one time the blacksmith left. There's a sword above the hearth. Rusty, blunt, completely useless, but no one dares move it. It belonged to the blacksmith's son, the one who left. The one who, according to legend, or at least the most dramatic version told over stew, joined a raid. This is the story people whisper about when the chores are done and the fire is low. When the snow traps everyone indoors, and even Brother Ivor stops pretending he has better things to do. You were there when he left. It was summer, early, still muddy. The chickens hadn't started laying properly yet and the fishing net had just rotted through again. Everything smelled like wet straw and ambition. He packed, light, a knife, a satchel, dried meat, a carved pendant, too many dreams. You could see them in his eyes, all crowded together like goats trying to escape a pen. He said he was going south, to join a crew sailing out of Skarsfjord. He said they were looking for fighters, for brave men, for glory, for gold. You looked at his arms, thin as fence rails. He looked at your boots, coated in manure. "I'll come back with silver," he said. You said nothing. You just nodded. That's what you do when someone is about to do something foolish. You don't tell them not to go. You let the world show them instead. The blacksmith stood in the doorway, said nothing, held a hammer, didn't lift it, didn't lower it, just held it. The boy, and he was still very much a boy, stepped past him. Down the road he didn't look back. You figured he'd be home by autumn, maybe sooner. Maybe after he realized boats are small and swords are heavy and that mead dose and tea help with seasickness. But he didn't come back that autumn. Or the one after. Then one spring, you didn't recognize him at first. His face was swollen. Red. Pale patches where the sun had stopped trying. His hair was shorter. Or gone. His clothes were not his. And he limped. He smelled like fish and wool and salt, and something you later realized was shame. He didn't say much. Just, "Did my mother keep the pendant? She had, he took it." He didn't ask for anything else. He left the sword. The dull one, the useless one, the one he never got to use. No one asked what happened, not even the blacksmith, not even when he moved back into the shed behind the forge, and spent the next 2 years repairing broken hinges in silence. After he died quietly, during a nap by the fire, someone hung the sword over the hearth. They said it was a reminder, but no one said what of. Some say he never even made it to Skarsfjord, that he got on the wrong boat, or was left behind, or that the ship turned back. Others say he went on the raid, saw the blood, the fire, the burning monasteries, and chose not to lift his sword. But most just say he did what many think about but never admit. He left. For a while, he tried to be something else, and then he came back. Every winter, someone mentions him. Usually when the soup is thin or the goats are acting strange, someone says, "Remember the blacksmith's boy?" And someone else always answers, "He came back," as if that's the most important part. And maybe it is. You look up at the sword now, bent, chipped, stained from time, not blood. You've never held it. You don't want to. You don't need to, because you already know how heavy it is. The axe has never touched blood, but you sharpen it anyway. Not because you expect a raid, not because you're cold, not because any real plan exists. You sharpen it because someone said something to someone else who said something at the market. And now the idea is, in the air like the smell of burning barley, faint, odd and impossible to ignore once it's there. "They're gathering ships in the south," said your cousin. "Something about a new chief," added your neighbor. "I heard they need strong arms," muttered Brother Ivor, pointedly, while flexing the one that hurts when it's cold. "But you went home and found your axe. It's not a raiding axe. It's a wood axe, thick, sturdy, meant for logs, not necks. But it still sharpens the same. You sit on your stool, whetstone in one hand, blade in the other. The sound is soft, rhythmic, something between prayer and preparation. Your wife watches you from across the longhouse. She doesn't ask, she doesn't comment, but she slices the bread a little thinner than usual that evening, and sets an extra blanket by your sleeping bench. You know what that means. The baby doesn't understand. He grabs at your wrist while you polish the blade. You gently move his hand away. He does not care about raids, only about soft things and full bellies. You wish you could do the same. That night, you lie awake. You imagine the boat, the sail, the sea. You imagine standing among strangers, shoulder to shoulder, all of them taller, louder, braver. You imagine a village, smoke, fire. You imagine lifting the axe. You stop imagining. The next morning, you check your gear, what little there is. A cloak, the least patched one, a pouch with dried meat, a skin of water, the ACS, now sharp enough to matter, dull enough not to terrify you. A knife, you do not pack the comb. That feels presumptuous. You speak to no one about it, but Brother Ivo polishes his belt buckle. Your neighbor suddenly needs to test his boots for long walks. The young man down the road starts running around the frozen pond every morning, panting like a dying ox. No one says it, everyone feels it. You go outside and look south, toward the sea. There's no path, just trees, frozen ground, a vague direction. You stare for a long time. Your wife brings you a bowl of stew. You eat slowly. She says, "You're not leaving." You nod, but say nothing. She doesn't push. She just adds more logs to the fire. You think again about the raid. If it exists, if it matters. You think about the baby, about the goats, about the hole in the roof and the shed door that won't close right anymore. You think about the blacksmith's son, about his sword, about the look in his eyes when he came back. That night, you oil the axe, then hang it on the wall, not high, not low, just there. You lie down. Your wife is already asleep. You close your eyes. The sea is still far away. And tomorrow, the fence needs fixing again. No one here has ever been on a raid. Not a real one. Not one with swords and sails and foreign priests dropping their golden cups in panic. But that doesn't stop the stories. They live in the longhouse, passed around like warm stew in cold hands. They grow in the corners of mouths, in the flicker of firelight, in the silence after the last bowl is scraped clean. You know them by heart. There's the one about Torlife from 3 valleys over, who allegedly sailed all the way to the lands of the Franks and came back with a helmet that didn't fit and a scar he refused to explain. He died 2 winters later slipping on a frozen turnip, but no one includes that part. There's the tale of Olga the flat-toothed, who threw an Englishman off a tower with one arm and then built a granary out of the man-est shield. You've never seen a shield large enough to serve as a roof beam, but no one dares question it. And of course, There's the epic of Eric Naito's, named, ironically, after the trip, not before. According to legend, he sailed, burned, pillaged, fought, howled, and married a redhead ghost princess. He came back with a chest full of silver and a strange cough. The silver vanished, the cough didn't. You sit by the fire and listen. Brother Ivor does the telling tonight. He gestures too much, adds, claims the sea turned red with the blood of monks. Your daughter giggles. Your wife stirs the stew. The baby chews on the ear of the wooden horse someone carved for him last month. Ivar's voice dips low. And then, he says, Eric reached the top of the tower, sword in hand, beard full of ash, and the coward king begged for mercy. He looks at you. You nod. Not because you believe it, but because that's the ritual. When the story ends, the silence is heavy. The kind that makes people look at the floor, at their hands, at the axe they never lifted in anger. Someone pokes the fire. Someone else coughs. No one says, did that really happen? Because it didn't. Not exactly, but that doesn't matter. The sagas are not for accuracy. They're for warmth. For identity. For something to cling to in the middle of a winter that doesn't seem to end. You've told one or two yourself. Beyond the legends, the mind-numbing life of a Viking farmer Sigmund V. The Viking diet, Part 1. You knew it before you opened your eyes. The smoke. That specific, vaguely smoky, slightly sour, scent oats. Again, you don't blame your wife. You don't even blame the goat, though he did eat half the carrots, meant to stretch the stew last week. You blame the way the world works. The harvest comes in strange, unbalanced waves. 1 year, too many the next, a surplus of sour apples. But oats, they never fail. They never vanish. They never, ever take a holiday. You sit up on the edge of your bench bed, stretch, yawn, immediately regret it. Your neck reminds you, it doesn't bend that way anymore. The fire's still warm. That's something. You reach for the bowl already waiting for you near the hearth. It's warm, heavy, predictable. You don't need to taste it to know. But you do anyway. A mouthful of grainy, mushy, beige regret. There's a sliver of something sweet, maybe dried berry. You chew it slowly. It puts up a fight, then disappears into the mass like a soldier lost in the fog. You chew, swallow, chew again. Your wife is stirring a second part. A larger one. Also oats. For the baby this time. Maybe for the chickens later. Maybe as mortar for the next bit of fence. Your daughter wrinkles her nose. Didn't we have oats yesterday? Your wife doesn't even look up. You asked the same question yesterday. The girl shrinks slightly and keeps eating. Brother Ivor enters from outside, covered in frost, carrying absolutely nothing useful. He sits, takes a bowl, eats in silence. Like a man facing trial. You wonder, idly, how many bowls of oats you've eaten in your life. Too many to count, too many to remember, but not too many to forget. You've had them boiled, baked, cold, clumpy, soupy, salted, honeyed, stirred into beer, mashed into cakes, spread across wounds. Yeah, really used as offerings. And once, during a particularly odd midsummer rite poured over your head, while standing in a barrel. Long story. You once tried to refuse oats. You'd gone 3 days without. There had been dried fish, hard bread, half a sausage someone left behind after a wedding. You felt free, powerful, like a man in control of his culinary destiny. Then the storm came. The stores ran low. And suddenly, oats again. They always come back. You eat quietly. The baby smears his oats across his own face, the wall, and the dog. The dog licks him. No one stops it. At this point, you're all in it together. After breakfast, your wife puts more oats in the pot. Prepping for tomorrow. You go outside, stomach heavy, head light. There's something about oats that makes you slow, not sleepy, not tired. Just ... Subdued. You walk past the coop. The rooster glares at you. You nod. You think he's eating oats too. He looks betrayed. You check the fence. Still standing. You check the root cellar. More oats. You check the barn. The goat is chewing on a piece of wood. You decide not to ask what it used to be. At midday you return for lunch. Oat cakes. Flat. Dry. A little burnt on the edges. You chew them slowly. Each bite is like a memory of a meal. Your daughter suggests adding herbs. Your wife gives her a look that silences birds. Brother Ivor eats 3, then says, would be nice with butter. You all stare at him. He knows what he's done. Evening arrives with more oats. This time, thin, watery, barely worth the spoon. The wind howls outside. The fire crackles. The baby has oats on his eyebrows. You stare into your bowl. You chew. You swallow. You exist. And somewhere in the corner of your mind, you wonder if anyone has ever died of too many oats. Then you remember the alternative. No oats. You shudder. You take another bite and say nothing. The word butter still lives in your head. Golden, soft, salted, maybe. If the gods were kind. You haven't seen it in 3 seasons. But sometimes, in the half-light between chores and dreams, you remember the way it slid across warm bread like spring sunlight melting snow. You remember the way your wife once folded herbs into it, back when you had herbs, and milk, and thyme. Now, you have spread. That's what you're all calling it. To feel better. This morning's spread is made of churned something. Maybe goat's milk. Maybe turnip oil. Maybe defeat. It's pale, waxy, too thick, too smear, too soft, too slice. Then at the spread. Then, back at the OTK, you attempt it anyway. The cake cracks. The spread resists. Together, they crumble like poorly handled diplomacy. Your wife chews quietly. She has mastered the art of resignation. Your daughter pretends not to mind. She sings while she eats, loudly, off-key. No one stops her. It's the only joy left in the room. Brother Ivor sniffs the spread. Not bad, he says, in the same tone someone might use to describe a well-shaped potato. You know what real butter tastes like. You remember the day you traded an axe head for a lump of it at the summer market. You brought it home, wrapped in moss. Your wife's eyes widened. Your daughter danced in a circle. The baby, not yet born, kicked your wife's ribs in celebration. You all ate buttered everything for 2 days. It was gone before you realized it, like a song, or a warm breeze. Now, even saying the word feels extravagant. You tried to make butter again. Once. You churned for hours. Your arms ached. Your hope rose. Then, then at the soup. Then back at it. The comparison feels like blasphemy. Your daughter blows on each spoonful before eating it. She counts under her breath. 1, 2, 3. Then slurps. You ask what she's doing. She says, timing my bites so I don't get bored. You don't respond. The baby tries to put both hands in the bowl. He succeeds. The dog licks one. No one stops either of them. Later, you add water to the pot. Just a little. Not because it needs it, because it might make the soup last one more meal. It's not about stretching food, it's about stretching purpose. You remember when soup had names. Goat bone soup. Thick, greasy. Good for winter. Leek and barley. Thin but satisfying. Fish head soup. Unpleasant to look at. Surprisingly comforting to eat. Now, you just call it the usual. Sometimes you imagine opening a tavern, serving soup, but different kinds, with names, with pride. 3-herb lamb stew, forest mushroom and smoked onion, river fish and wild leek chowder. You'd print menus. On bark, maybe. You'd serve it in bowls without cracks. You'd use salt. Every time you sigh. Loudly. The dog sighs back. After dinner your wife adds more water. You stir the soup stirs back. Sluggish. Tired, resigned. You wonder if soup ever wants to be something else. Maybe porridge. Maybe just water. You take one more spoonful, then cover the pot. Let it rest. It's done enough. You lie down on your bench. Full, not satisfied. Warm, not cheerful. The way most nights end. And in the quiet, you imagine a soup with flavor, with name, with meaning. Until then, it's just soup. And that will have to do. They call it flatbread, but that's generous. It's more of a concept than a food. A disc, a promise, a memory of something baked. It arrives at every meal, like a polite guest who's overstayed their welcome. Dry, sometimes charred, sometimes soft in the middle where it wasn't cooked through. Always there, always waiting. You sit at the table, though calling it a table is also generous, and look down at your flatbread. It looks back, unapologetic. It cracks, you sigh. Your wife sets a stack of them in the center of the table, wrapped in a cloth that's older than your boots. No one thanks her. Not out of rudeness. Just understanding. This is how it goes. You take a bite. It flakes. You chew. Your jaw works harder than your hands did all morning. There is stew on the table. Or soup. Or something in between. But everyone knows the real focus is the bread. Because that's what you stretch. That's what you lean on when everything else runs thin. Flatbread and silence. That's the meal. Your daughter chews slowly, dipping the edge of hers into the bowl like she's hoping for a miracle. She bites, makes a face, keeps chewing. Brother Ivor eats his dry, like a man trying to prove something. You've never asked what. Thyra breaks hers into quarters, arranges them neatly, doesn't eat, just judges. The baby gnaws on a corner until it dissolves into mush, then sneezes. You don't know if the two events are related. The fire crackles softly. A hen clucks somewhere outside. The wind whispers through a gap in the thatch, cold enough to make your ear twitch. You take another bite. You've had what? You remember once, years ago, eating flatbread so warm it steamed, so soft it folded, so fragrant it made you pause. That bread had butter. Real butter. It was gone in 2 bites. Now, the bread is just ... survival. Sometimes there's a surprise, a seed, a pocket of air, a bit of burned edge that tastes slightly different from the rest. These are the gifts of the flat. Tiny, rare, unspeakably precious. You watch your wife break hers carefully, stacking halves. She eats in silence, eyes fixed on a wall, thinking, probably, about what needs to be done tomorrow, or about how much flour is left, or about nothing at all. You like that about her. After the meal, you wrap the remaining flatbreads in the cloth. You tuck them into the basket near the fire. They'll be there in the morning, they always are. You sit back. The silence stretches. Brother Ivor clears his throat. Your daughter taps the table. The baby drools. The dog yawns. Loudly. No one says a word. You close your eyes. Your belly is full. Your heart is ... quiet. And the bread, still there, waiting. Beyond the legends, the mind-numbing life of a Viking farmer. Segment 6. The unreality of Viking romance. Part 1. Splinters, straw, and shared blankets. The first time you saw her, not the golden kind poets speak of, not sunlight caught in braids, but real straw, scratched, flattened, sticking out at angles, from mucking the barn, or hauling hay, or just existing, like everyone else, in a world built out of things that poke. She had mud on her boots, and her sleeves were rolled unevenly. One elbow showed a faint bruise. She wasn't smiling. No one was that day. And still, you looked. And she looked back. That was the beginning. There was no feast, no music, no braided crowns or garlands of flowers, just a nod, and then chores. Later, a few quiet words while pulling beets from hard soil. Something about the weather, the stubbornness of goats, the way the clouds hung like wet linen. Romance, if you could call it that, didn't come with thunder or poetry. It came with shared with boots that matched in filth, with knowing how someone looked when they were too tired to talk. You've slept near each other long before you touched. The longhouse is small. The benches are hard. The blankets are few. Eventually, one night, it was just warmer to sleep together. You said nothing. She said nothing. You both woke with fewer aches. That was enough. Later, much later, came the moment everyone expects. The first kiss. It was awkward. Your noses bumped. Her hands were cold. You laughed. Quietly, so as not to wake the pigs. She smiled. For real that time. That was better than the kiss. There was no wedding feast. There was a stew, a piece of fish someone didn't finish. A single carved spoon passed back and forth. Your mother gave her a brooch. Your father nodded once and never mentioned it again. Now, years later, you share a blanket. It's Korsiki's at the neck, but it's yours. You both pull it in the same direction. You've learned things, like how she prefers the bench near the wall in winter, and how she sleeps with one knee out, and how she always wakes before the fire dies, but pretends not to if you already up. Sometimes you argue, usually about practical things. Who forgot to soak the beans? Who stepped on the comb? Who left the barn door unlatched and let the rooster escape? Sometimes it's louder than it needs to be. Sometimes it's just silence stretched too tight. But then there's a touch, a shared cup, a smirk, and the fire is warm again. You remember once, during a snowstorm that sealed the door shut for 2 days, she told you about a dream. You were both old, she said. Your hair was white, your back bent, but you were still splitting firewood, and she was still telling you to aim straighter. You laughed. She didn't. She was serious. Now, every time you miss the log slightly, you think of that. You think, at least she's still here to see it. Tonight, you lie side by side. The baby whimpers in his sleep. The fire hums low. Your shoulders touch. She shifts. You grunt. She grunts back. That's as close to I love you as anyone says these days. But it's enough. You reach down, pull the blanket higher, adjust the corner beneath her foot, and close your eyes. The straw still pokes through the mattress. Her elbow still bruises your nose is still bumped when you both turn the same way. But you sleep warmer, and that, in Viking life, is the greatest kind of romance there is. There are no love letters in your house. There is no ink, no parchment, no quiet hour by candlelight in which to pour your feelings into words, seal them with wax, and tuck them into her hand. There's just a pile of wood and a bucket of fish gut, and that's where the romance lives. You don't say it often, or ever, but you do things, like chopping the wood the way she likes it. Not too thick, not too thin, just the size that fits the stove without too much fuss. She never asked, but she noticed, because she stopped fixing them afterward. And every time you clean the fish, you leave her the better fillets. You claim they just came out that way. She pretends to believe you. That's your language. That's your poem. That's your Viking love letter. Once, she mended your tunic before you asked. You had ripped it at the shoulder, dragging a stubborn goat through the mud. You were planning to sew it, eventually, but when you reached for it the next morning, it was whole again, and the stitches were tighter than you would have done. You didn't say thank you. She didn't expect one. Instead, you brought back her favorite kind of root vegetable from the market 3 villages over. The one she grumbled about not seeing in years. You traded half your fish catch for it. She boiled it into soup and never mentioned where it came from. These are your gestures, unspoken, unwritten, unbreakable. You know how she stacks the firewood in perfect alternating rows. She knows how you salt the fish a little more than needed, just the way she likes it. She leaves the last bite of flatbread for you. You warm her boots by the hearth when she's not looking. When the baby cries at night, you take turns, not because you agreed on it, but because the pattern formed on its own, like snow settling on the roof. It is a romance of rhythms, of routines, of the 1,000 quiet ways to people say I am here without ever using the words. There was one day, you remember it now, when she was sick, not gravely, just sick enough to stay in bed. You did everything that day. The goats, the stew, even the baby's washing. You didn't say anything about it. You didn't ask for praise. But that night, as you lay down beside her, she reached for your hand and held it for a moment longer than usual. No words, just weight and warmth. That was enough. The love here isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with flowers or songs or firelit dances. It arrives in fish guts and folded cloaks and soup that doesn't boil over because she watched it for you. It lives in split logs and silence, in patched wool and shared glances, in everything you do when the day is too long, the wind is too cold, and you both still make sure the other gets the last bite. That is your love letter, and she reads it every day. It begins with a spoon, not a broken one, not a stolen one, just ... the wrong one. You used a long-handled stirring spoon to scrape oats from the bottom of the stew pot. She sees you do it. She freezes. That's not the scraping spoon, she says. You blink. You look at the spoon. Then you say, carefully, it worked fine. And with those 3 words, it begins. The argument is not about the spoon. Not really. It's about the last week of cold stew. It's about the goat escaping again. It's about 3 nights of interrupted sleep and the fact that the firewood is always damp and the floor always creaks where she steps in the morning. The words come slow at first, then faster. I told you not to. Well, maybe if someone labeled. You never. Your daughter retreats to the loft. Brother Ivor finds something urgent to do with rope outside. Even the baby senses the shift and begins chewing his sleeve with extra focus. You don't shout, neither does she, but your voice is sharpened like the wind just before snow. Not violent, just cold, just enough to sting. Eventually it ends, because it always does. She puts the pot back on the fire. You sit on the bench and pretend to fix the boot that doesn't really need fixing. The room is quiet. Dinner is served. Flatbread soup. Silence. Later, you both crawl into bed. It's the same straw-filled bench. The same scratchy wool blanket. But tonight, you each stay on your side. The blanket line forms between you. Not a wall. Not a fortress. Just ... a crease. The fire dims. She sighs once. You shift. She pulls the blanket tighter. You let her. It stays that way all night. Neither of you speaks. Morning comes. You wake to the sound of snow melting. Just barely. On the roof. She's already up. You see the bowl of water she left for you by the door. Warmed. Just a little. You nod to yourself. She still cares. Later, while chopping wood, you set aside the thicker logs, the ones she likes for baking. She'll notice. At supper, she ladles stew into your bowl first. Doesn't speak. Just does it. That night, you lie back down on the bench. The blanket covers you both. No apology, just warmth. And that's how it works. You argue, you cool, you breathe, and then, little by little, the blanket line disappears. There are things you don't say, because you don't need to, because they already live in the space between you. You've never said I love you, not one. Not on the day you moved her things to your bench. Not after the birth of your daughter. Not after the coldest winter when you both slept back to back to keep the baby warm between you. It isn't coldness. It's something else. It's a kind of loyalty that wears no decoration. A devotion that grows quietly, like moss on stone. Slow, unnoticed, but impossible to remove. You rise early now. She does too. Sometimes you speak in the mornings, but not always. Sometimes it's just the sounds of wooden bowls, firewood cracking, the shuffle of boots, and still, you're in sync. She hands you your cloak before you ask. You pour her tea without needing to look. This is not romance. This is something gentler, a trust that no longer requires ceremony. When your mother died, she didn't offer comforting words. She simply sat beside you for 2 hours, sewing in silence. Her hand rested on your knee once. That was all. It helped more than anything anyone else said. When she got sick, not the sniffles, but deep in the chest, deep in the bones, you said little, but you woke every hour that night to feel her forehead. You added wood to the fire before it even thought about dying. You stirred honey into her drink, though she never asked. She watched you from under the blanket and didn't speak, because she knew. You think back to the time the river flooded and ruined your stored grain. You stood ankle deep in water, staring at a winter's worth of hope washing away. She came to stand beside you, said nothing. But the next day, she rose early and made soup from bark and roots and the last of the lentils. No complaints. No drama. You remember the long walk home from the village where the trade had failed. You returned with nothing but a cracked jar of mustard and a stubbed toe. She didn't ask why. She gave you the last piece of bread. She wrapped your foot. You slept well that night. You don't talk much anymore. Not because there's nothing left to say, but because there's nothing that needs saying. You know, when she's angry, her hands get louder. She slaps bread dough harder than usual. She knows when you're retired. You stir your tea longer than needed and forget to blink. You've learned the language of silence. You both speak it fluently. And sometimes, in the evening, after the baby sleeps and the fire hisses down to coals, you both sit, side by side, eyes closed, breathing, not touching, not whispering, just being together. And that is enough. Beyond the legends, the Mind-Numbing life of a Viking farmer. 7. Animal neighbors and the chaos they bring. Part 1. The rooster. Es vendetta you didn't tea. Choose the rooster. He was part of a trade. 1 sack of barley, half a jar of pickled fish, and a lopsided promise from a man whose beard was longer than his word. You brought home a hen, a spool of thread, and the rooster. At the time, you thought the rooster was a bonus. Now you know better. He's not large, he's not particularly handsome. He crows late, and then again, and again. But the worst part is this. He knows you. Somehow, in some terrible twist of cosmic humor, this rooster has decided that you and only you are his rival. It began the first week. You entered the coop, bucket in hand, same as always. You bent to scatter the grain. He watched. He waited. And then he struck. A blur of feathers. A shriek. A peck to the shin. You dropped the bucket. The hens scattered like feathered lightning. The rooster strutted back to his corner, triumphant, chest puffed like he'd slain a dragon. You had a bruise the size of a walnut for days. Since then, it's been war. You've tried peace. You've spoken to him, calmly, firmly, with respect. He pecked your boot and crowed directly into your face. You tried bribery, dried bugs, a boiled root, half a berry. He ate the offerings, then chased you around the coop in circles, while the hens looked on, horrified or amused. It's hard to tell with chickens. You've tried avoidance, sending your daughter instead. She returned unharmed, holding an egg and smiling. The rooster let her pass without incident. Of course he did. You've begun to think this is personal. He crows differently when you walk past. Sharper, shorter, with a tone. You've noticed he watches from the fence post when you chop wood. And when you stubbed your toe last week, he crowed 3 times in rapid succession. Mockery, you're sure of it. Your wife says, he's just a bird, but she's never been ambushed by one. You've started carrying a broom on your morning rounds. Not to strike him, just to keep distance. It doesn't work. He's learned how to dart under it, around it. He once used it as a springboard. He locked him out of the coop once. He slept on the windowsill and stared at you through the night. When you opened the door in the morning, he stepped inside without a sound. No crow, no charge. But later that day, your best wool tunic had a hole in it. You're not saying it was him, but you're not saying it wasn't. Brother Ivor thinks it's funny. Of course he does. He's never been attacked mid-yawn. Even the dog avoids the rooster now. This morning, you entered the yard with purpose. Boots firm, back straight, bucket ready. The rooster was waiting, on the fence post, 1 foot tucked in, head cocked, watching. You took 1 step. He hopped down. You both froze. Then you, the Viking farmer, backed slowly into the longhouse, closed the door, and leaned against it with your dignity in fragments. Later, your daughter fed the hens, returned with an egg and a smile. The rooster nodded at her, like they had an understanding. You watched from the doorway. You know he's plotting, tomorrow he'll try again, and so will you, because one of you has to collect the eggs, and this is Viking life. The sea may be calm, the skies may be clear, but somewhere in the yard, a bird is watching, waiting, feathers fluffed, ready. You've built fences. You've fixed You've reinforced the barn door with 2 extra planks, a length of rope, and something resembling a prayer. The goat gets out, not just out into places goats were never meant to be, into your storage bin, into your stew, into your heart, but not in a good way. You didn't name him, your daughter did. It means evening. At first, it seemed fitting. He was calm, mellow, soft, tied the kind of goat that made people say, oh, when they saw him. Now the name feels ironic, because evening is when he's at his worst. It started with the shed. You were inside, mending a basket. The door creaked. You looked up. There he stood, on your potatoes. You blinked. He chewed. He blinked back. There was no wind, no broken plank, no open gate, just goat. Later, you tested the latch. It was still closed. The next day, it happened again, then again. Soon, it became clear. Kvelda had learned. You watched, one day, quietly, from behind the fence. He approached the door. Slowly, casually, like a guest. Then, with one horn, he nudged the bottom of the latch, up both his snout. He nudged the door, and it opened. He walked inside like he paid rent. You didn't know whether to be angry or impressed. You tried to outsmart him. A new latch. He learned it. A rope loop. He untied it. He moved it. You told your wife. She said, maybe he just wants to help. You said, he ate half a broom. She shrugged. You tried bribery, a bowl of scraps outside the barn to distract him. He ignored it, went straight for the barrel of dried mushrooms instead. Your daughter thinks it's funny. She says he's clever, a thinker, a philosopher. Even, you say he's a menace. Last week, he opened the storage cupboard, walked inside, and somehow climbed onto the shelf where the winter apples were kept. You found him there, lying among the fruit like a smug, furry deity. He'd eaten 5, licked 3 more. You ate none. You tried moving him farther into the pasture. He returned before you did. You started locking the barn with actual keys. He stood by the door and waited. When you opened it, he walked in ahead of you. There's no stopping him. You've begun to think maybe he doesn't want food. Maybe he wants inclusion. Now, he sits by the hearth sometimes. Not always. Just when the mood strikes. The baby feeds him scraps. The dog tolerates him. Even the rooster leaves him alone. Last night, you heard something. A soft clunk. In the dark. You got up, grabbed a torch, and stepped outside. The barn door was open. Inside, Kvelda was curled up in the hay. Peaceful. Quiet. He looked at you like you were interrupting. You sighed. Closed the door. From the outside, this morning, he was back in the coop again. Of course he was. You accept it now. Kvelda lives where he wants. He walks among you, eats among you, burps among you. You no longer try to keep him out. Instead, you leave the latch loose, and when he comes in, you nod. Because maybe it is easier to have a goat who acts like a guest than a guest who acts like a goat. Act 1. The discovery it begins with flour on the floor. Not a spill, not a dusting. A trail, a light, deliberate path. You notice it while reaching for the stew pot. Just a faint white line stretching from the meal sack to the wooden wall. You pause, blink, Look again. The line is real. So you bend down, slow and suspicious, and follow it. It doesn't go far. Just beneath the bench, behind the stacked pots, to a hole you hadn't noticed before. A perfect, round hole. Small, clean, too clean. You stand slowly, look at the meal sack. You open it. You sigh. There's a nest inside, right in the middle, tucked into the flour like it was designed for comfort. Bits of hay, a piece of thread, something that looks like a fingernail, but you don't ask questions. No mice in sight, but they've been here, and judging by the small squeaky insult to your pantry, they will return. You close the sack with reverence. You inform your wife. She nods. Like you just said, the sun rose in the east. It's winter, she says. They're hungry. So are we, you think. But you don't say it. Instead, you set a bowl over the hole and weigh it down with a small rock. A gesture of defiance. The baby watches you with. You feel like a hero, briefly. Act 2. The escalation 3 days later. The bowl has moved. Not far, but enough. You don't speak of it. You just stare at it during breakfast. Your wife notices. She says nothing. That evening, you check the sack again. Less flour, more nesting. You find one. Tiny. Gray. Fast. It darts out of the sack, across the shelf, and vanishes behind the firewood. You throw a spoon after it. It doesn't help. The dog lifts his head, then lowers it. You declare war. You carve a trap. Simple, sturdy, slightly overconfident. You bait it with barley. Set it near the hole. You check it every hour, nothing. Then, the next morning, the barley is gone. Trap untouched. You nod, slowly. An equal adversary. That night, you try again. More bait, smaller trigger, stronger wood. The next day, nothing. Your daughter names one of them. You stop checking the trap. Act 3. The surrender zone. Week later, the sack is empty. Utterly. Completely. Not a single grain remains. You hold it in both hands. A hollow symbol of your defeat. You say, maybe the neighbors have some meal to spare. Your wife says, don't bring back another goat. You say nothing. The mouse trail remains. So do the holes. So do the mice. You hang the empty sack on the wall. As a warning, to no one in particular. You try storing meal in a jar. The mice find it. You try hanging it from a rafter. They climb the wall. Eventually, you stop fighting. You leave a bowl of scraps near the fire. They take it. You hear them at night. Tiny feet, tiny teeth, tiny crimes, and somehow, life goes on. You stir the soup a little longer. You shake out the bread before eating it. You place the spoon a little farther from the floor. And when your daughter leaves a bit of flatbread near the hole, you pretend not to notice. Because deep down, you know they're just surviving. Same as you. He wasn't bred for it. He wasn't trained. And truthfully, he wasn't very good at it. But for one unforgettable week last spring, your dog decided he was a farmer. It began innocently. You were out in the field, pulling stones from the thaw-soft earth, preparing it for barley. The air was still cold, but not cruel. The kind of day where you could almost imagine warmth returning. The dog followed, as always, tail wagging, ears perked, trotting at your side like a soldier without orders. You gave him none. And yet, without warning, he began digging. Not in the chaotic, joyful way of a dog burying a bone. No, this was methodical, focused. He dug a straight line, paused, sniffed, then began another. He finished his third row, sat down, looked at you, tongue out, chest heaving. Proud you said nothing. He took that as encouragement. From then on, he joined every chore. When you gathered kindling, he carried sticks in his mouth. Sometimes helpful, sometimes already moldy. When you checked the traps, he sniffed each one first. Once, he scared off a rat before you even lifted the lid. You praised him like he'd slain a wolf. He barked once, modestly. The next day, he chased the chickens. Not for sport, not for food. He was herding them, badly, but intentionally. They scattered, of course. The rooster screamed. You ran in with your arms flailing, yelling names no one should ever call a dog. The dog sat down in the middle of the coop, tail thumping, looking satisfied. The chickens didn't lay for 2 days. You forgave him after one. When you mucked the goat shed, he followed closely, sniffing each pile like a critic in a cheese market. He sneezed, then returned to the task. Steadfast, loyal. slightly confused. Your wife shook her head. "Stop encouraging him," she said. "But you didn't. Because when he trotted beside you with a stick in his mouth and dirt on his nose, something about the farm felt less lonely. That week, you swear the firewood stacked itself straighter. The goats stayed calmer. Even the rooster seemed quieter. Until the dog tried milking the cow. You were there. You saw it. He walked up beside her, sat down, stared at her odor with great purpose, raised a paw. You stopped him, just in time. The cow stared at you both. The message was clear. Do it again, and she'd kick someone, probably you. After that, the dog retired from dairy. Still, he continued his duties. He barked at falling snow. He circled the coop twice each morning. He sat beside the fence during storms, watching it like a sentry waiting for an invisible enemy. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the phase ended. He returned to napping in the sun, to chewing on firewood ends, to chasing his tail like it owed him money. You didn't question it. Sometimes ambition burns out. Sometimes the farm doesn't need another hand. Just a warm body and a wagging tail. But you still smile when he follows you to the field. And every so often, when you're planting, he digs one neat, straight line in the dirt, then sits and waits for praise. You give it every time, because once, just once, your dog tried to be a farmer, and that was more than enough. You built it the second winter, when the food stores grew too large for the kitchen and the goat too bold for the hallway. It was meant to be temporary. That was 8 years ago. Now it leans slightly to the left, not alarmingly, just enough that you pretend it's intentional, like the shed is stretching, yawning, getting comfortable. You meant to fix the roof last summer, but the barley needed harvesting, and the baby had the fever, and then the goat escaped again, and then the snow came. So now the roof weeps. Not heavily, not yet, but you know what's coming. You fetch a bucket, not because you think it'll help, but because it's the thing to do. Of rope ends and bent nails and that one thing you might need someday. You crouch and sniff the wool. Still dry. The drip continues. You run your hand along the beam. It flakes. You nod. Silently, respectfully. It's not the beam's fault. Time is heavier than rain. You step back and stare up through the dim light. Not the leak, but the way it holds so many things you forgot you owned. The shovel from your brother's visit. The cloak your mother spun. The splintered sled from the winter the lake froze too soon. It holds time, your seasons. And now, it's reminding you, gently, that time continues. You drift to sleep with the sound of plunk. Plunk, you set them just outside the door. The pile grows, so does the hole in the wall. By the time the sun rises, your breath has stopped clouding. The sky turns the color of old wool. The dog wanders over and stares inside the shed. You say, "Don't look at me like that." He sits anyway. Your daughter appears with a chunk of bread in her hand. She stares at the pile. For now, you'll just keep moving things up. You fetch a second tarp, throw it over the exposed side, weigh it down with a log and a prayer. It flaps a little in the wind, but it holds. For today, you don't rebuild the wall. You patch it. There's a difference. Rebuilding means measurements, plans, intentions. Patching is more like an apology written in splinters and twine. You collect the least rotted boards, the half-straight nails. A plank from the fence you meant to mend last year, the leg of an old stool, just wide enough to pretend it belongs. You work slowly, because fast work breaks things, and because you know deep down this wall will never be whole again. The dog watches from the doorway, not judging, just present. Your daughter hands you nails, one by one. She asks, "Is it fixed yet?" You say, "It's quieter now." She nods and goes back to drawing faces in the frost. You drive the nails in with rhythm, not force, just pressure. You hum, a tune without a name, just the kind that keeps time in your hands. The boards groan, the wind tests them, but they stay mostly. The hole is smaller now. You step back and look. It's ugly, but it's covered, and in this life, that counts for a lot. You step inside. The shadows fall a little more slowly. The damp is still there. The smell of softening wood and hidden mice, but it doesn't feel like surrender. Not today. You move the sack of barley back inside. Place a flat stone under it this time, you learn. You hang the lantern from a different hook, one that still listens when you ask it to hold weight. You sweep, not all of it, just enough to see the floor. There's something sacred in this kind of work. Not the kind sung in songs or carved in stone, just the daily kind. The kind no one sees. The kind that keeps the world from falling in. Later, at supper, your wife says, "Did you fix it?" You say, "It'll hold." She nods, because she knows what that means. You sleep a little better that night. Not because the shed is whole, but because you've done what you could, with what you had, in the time you had it. And in the Viking world, that's as close to peace as you get. It doesn't happen all at once. There's no dramatic collapse, no thunderclap, no shout from the hilltop. It just happens. A morning like any other. The sky pale, the fire stubborn. You go outside to fetch a bundle of kindling, and you stop. The shed hasn't fallen, but it's no longer standing either. The roof has caved inward gently like a sigh. The back corner has sunk into the softened earth, tilted like it's trying to lie down. A single beam sticks up from the top like a finger raised in apology. The door is still closed. That's the part that gets you. Somehow, the door is still holding on. You don't open it. You don't need to. You walk around the side, peer through the hole where the wall used to be. Inside, everything is leaning on everything else. A shelf has collapsed into a stack of crates. The tarp hangs like an exhausted ghost. The lantern is cracked. You hear a rustle. A mouse, probably. Maybe two. You don't blame them. Everyone needs shelter. You take a step back. Fold your arms. Tilt your head. It's time. Not in the dramatic sense. Not in the sense of torches and axes, and this ends now. Just in the quiet way all things end. You stand there a while. The wind moves through the open wall. The sun, low and mild, shines on the slanted roof like a kind hand. The dog trots over, sits beside you. He looks at the shed, and at you. You say, "We had a good run." He doesn't argue. That afternoon, you move what you can. Not much is worth saving, but some things deserve one more season. A rusted hammer, a spool of copper wire, a length of twine that once held a trap together. You carry them inside. Not because you need them now, just because it feels wrong to leave them behind. You tell your wife. She says, "Finally." You say, "I'll burn what's left come spring." She nods. It's always spring when things are let go. The next few weeks, the shed just sits there, leaning, softening, becoming less shed and more shape. By midwinter, snow has covered the roof. By late winter, you can't even see the door. By spring, moss has begun to creep up the base. By summer, grass has filled the floor. And by fall, it's part of the hill. You build a new one, not much better, but stronger, smaller, maybe, but with thicker beams, and a stone foundation this time. The old shed stays where it was, a gentle slope now. Sometimes, the children climb on it. You don't stop them. Sometimes, the dog sleeps beside it. You let him, because it wasn't just a shed. It was part of your rhythm, your seasons, your story. And sometimes the best thing a farmer can do is finally let something rest. Beyond the legends, the mind-numbing life of a Viking farmer Segment 9 have happened. Part 1. The smoking straw incident. It starts with warmth, not the comforting kind, not the kind from soup or sun or a bed shared under a thick wool blanket. This warmth is suspicious, sneaky, out of place. It's spring, just barely. The snow has receded like a tired old man retreating into the forest. The fields are damp. The air's still sharp in the morning, but inside the barn it feels warm. You notice it when you go to check the straw bedding near the goats. It's early. The barn is quiet. Dust floats in lazy shafts of light from the slits in the beams. You crouch, sniff. There it is. A smell. Not hay. Not animal. Not sweat. Smoke. You pause, lean closer, move aside a clump of straw, and then you see it. A curl of gray, thin, twisting, rising like a guilty secret. Your breath stills. You dig faster, hands plunging through bedding, tossing aside fistfuls of straw. A patch of black, charred, not burning, not yet, but smoldering, warm to the touch, not hot, but waking. Your heart thuds. You grab the bucket by the door. Of course, it's half full, but it's enough. You douse it. A hiss, a puff, steam rises, silence returns. The goats shift in their pens, unconcerned. One sneezes. You exhale and sit back. The straw is soaked now, but safe. You stare at the blackened patch. How? There's no fire nearby. No lantern left burning. No spark from the hearth. You smell again. the faint hint of oil. You remember, yesterday, your son had helped clean the tools. He used a rag soaked in lamp oil. He told him to discard it, into the straw pile. You shake your head, not angry, just ... tired. You go inside, find him chewing on a crust of bread. You tell him what happened. He pales. Says sorry 6 times. You nod. He offers you his crust. You decline. Back in the barn, you remove the soaked straw, replace it with fresh bedding, check the walls, the beams, every corner. The rest is dry. That night, you don't sleep well. Not because you're afraid of fire, but because of what didn't happen. It didn't spread, didn't reach the wall, didn't take the goats, didn't take the barn, didn't take your home, but it could have, and that possibility sits with you in the dark, like a second shadow. In the morning, you lay down new rules. No oily rags in the barn, no open flames without eyes, no forgetting, not even once. Your wife agrees. She hands you a small pouch of salt. You ask why. She says, just sprinkle it where the burn was. You ask, to stop fire. She says, to tell it it's not welcome. You do it, not because you believe it, but because she does. The barn is quiet again. The straw dry, the air cold, but you still check the floor each morning, just to be sure. Because once, on a perfectly ordinary day, something tried to burn, and you stopped it, barely, but just barely is enough. You never meant to leave it burning. Of course not. The hearth is sacred, not in the grand temple, but in the small, quiet way that anything is sacred when it holds both warmth and danger in equal measure. It was a long day. You'd been digging up a new patch of earth for onions. The ground was stubborn, and your back more so. By the time the last row was finished, your fingers ached and your eyes stung. You came in just after dusk, boots caked in wet soil, the smell of effort on your skin. Inside, your wife had a pot on the hearth, thick stew, turnip, maybe rabbit, definitely salt. You sat, you ate, you said little. The fire crackled, as it always did. It had burned all day. Low, steady, coaxed along by careful hands. After supper, your wife took the baby to bed. You stayed behind, staring into the flames. The dog curled beside your feet. You scratched behind his ear. He thumped once, then stilled. The house was quiet, and so warm, and without really meaning to. You closed your eyes, just for a moment. But when you opened them again, the light had changed. It was brighter, too bright. The hearth, always your friend, your comfort, your center, had gotten greedy. A knot of pitch in the log had caught late and flared fast. A tall tongue of flame now licked up past the edge of the hearth. A spark had jumped, barely a flick, and kissed the fur of the rug. Now it smoldered. You moved before thought had time to speak. A jug of water, the edge of a cloak, a stomp of the boot. By the time your wife appeared in the doorway, your hands were soaked, your chest heaving, the air thick with smoke and steam. No damage, no fire, not really. Just a scare. But that was enough. You sat back against the wall. Your wife stood, silent, then said, sleep later, next time. You nodded. The rug bore a blackened edge now. Not much, just a charred bite in the wool. A reminder you didn't throw it away, you turned it. So, the singe faced the wall. A scar, hidden, but remembered. That night, you didn't sleep. You sat by the hearth, stoking the fire gently, watching it with the care you usually reserve for storms and babies. Because fire, you knew then, more clearly than ever, was both guest and intruder. It sits politely until it doesn't. You never again left it unguarded. Even for a moment, even with closed eyes. Years later, the rug still sat beneath your chair, and every time someone asked why the corner was blackened, you'd shrug. Fire got bored once, you'd say. And I was lucky it didn't want more. It was supposed to be soup. That's how most dangerous stories begin, isn't it? Your wife was away for the day, visiting her sister to farms over. The baby was with her. The older children were in the woods, hunting sounds and shadows. You were alone, which meant, for once, you had to cook. You weren't proud of your skills, but you could boil water, and you could chop roots, and if you added enough salt, even bark might pass for dinner. You gathered turnip, an onion, somewhat confused and soft, a few scraps of dried fish, mostly but you built a fire in the hearth, small, controlled. You placed the pot just so, measured the water by guess and guilt, added the ingredients, stirred. It smelled ... edible. You felt briefly triumphant. And then, of course, something needed your attention outside. One of the goats was crying. You stepped out for just a moment, maybe 5 minutes, but 5 minutes is an eternity, and when you returned, the smell had changed. It wasn't soup anymore. It was a warning. The pot had boiled over. Bubbling froth had splashed onto the hearthstone. A spark had landed on the dried rushes you'd swept into a corner but never discarded, and from that smolder, a low, creeping fire crawled along the edge of the floor. Small, but fast. You didn't think. You grabbed the nearest thing. A shovel. Not a bucket. Not a jug. A shovel. You slammed it down onto the burning rushes. Sparks flew. The dog barked. The flames resisted. You hit again. By the third strike, the fire gave up. The rushes scattered, charred and steaming. The air smelled of ash and onions. The soup, ruin. You sat on the stool, gripping the blackened shovel. The hearth flickered, meek now. Ashes danced in the air like tiny white apologies. The dog sniffed the edge of the floor, looked at you. Sniffed again. You said nothing. Just stared at the shovel. It had a dent now. The edge warped, as if surprised by its own heroism. When your wife returned, you told her everything. She didn't yell, didn't scold. She simply said, "No soup tomorrow." You both agreed. From then on, the shovel lived by the hearth. Not in the barn, not on the wall. Right there, beside the fire. Not because you expected trouble, but because it had once saved your house, and because there's comfort in knowing that even a bent tool with ash on its bladder can be exactly what needed one. Everything starts to burn. Some nights, the fire isn't real, but it feels like it is. You wake up in darkness, the kind of thick, total dark that swallows even the memory of light. And you feel it, not heat, exactly, but the sense of heat. As if your skin remembers something your eyes cannot confirm. You sit up, the house is quiet, no crackling, no flicker, no scent of smoke, but your heart is racing, and your breath is shallow. You get up, bare feet on packed dirt. The cold floor grounds you. Barely. You walk to the hearth. The coals are long dead, just a hush of grey, a pile of sleep. Still, you kneel, touch the edge of the stones. Cold. You press your hand to the back wall. The spot where the fire once reached too high, where the blackened soot remains, no matter how hard you scrub. Still cold. No fire. You exhale. Slowly. Twice. 3 times. Your chest begins to loosen. You sit there on the floor, wrapped in silence, wrapped in shadows. You don't wake your wife. She's curled beside the child, both breathing like trees in a windless forest. You watch them, then the hearth, then your hands. The memory of heat still lingers in your palms. Segment 10. The Neighbor Who Wouldn't Fix His Fence. Part 1. The day the cow walked in like she owned. The placenta is a specific kind of silence that falls over a Viking farmstead in the early morning. It isn't peaceful, not exactly. It's the kind of silence that holds its breath, like the land itself is waiting to see what sort of nonsense the day will bring. This morning, the nonsense arrived on 4 legs. You were halfway through a bowl of oat porridge when you saw her, brown, mud-streaked, and lumbering up the path as if summoned. She didn't run. She didn't even hesitate. The cow strolled through the broken fence like a chieftain returning from a long, victorious voyage. Your youngest pointer. "Papa, there's a cow in the yard." You didn't look up. Not right away. You already knew whose cow it was. You also knew whose fence it was supposed to be. And you knew, with the certainty of a man who has seen this play out many times before, that neither of those things would change anytime soon. When you finally stood, the cow was investigating your firewood pile. She gave it curious sniffs, and then began to chew on something that very much was not food. Yusai walked outside, and gave her the kind of stern look reserved for children and livestock. She blinked slowly. This wasn't the first time. Not even the 5th. And the fancier neighbor's fence had been giving up on its duties for the better part of 3 seasons. You had mended it, reinforced it with sticks and stones and, once, an old bench. But no matter what you did, it always sagged open again like a lazy yawn. And always, from the same gap, came the same cow. You waved your arms, shouted. She took a few steps back but didn't leave. Instead, she stared at you, as if considering her next move. You considered yours. Dragging a full-grown cow anywhere is not a task that ends quickly or cleanly, but letting her wander wasn't an option either. Last time, she had discovered your cabbage patch and sat on it, not trampled. Sat so you fetched a rope, looped it around her neck, and began the slow, humiliating process of leading her back. She resisted just enough to remind you who was truly in charge. It took half an hour. Your neighbor wasn't home, or pretended not to be. You tied the cow to his post, left a small pile of chewed firewood as a gift, and walked back. The fence was still open. You stared at it. One more board. That's all it would take. One, you knew you'd be the one to do it. Again, it wasn't that he was a bad man. Not really. Just a quiet one. A man of few words and fewer repairs. He lived on the edge of the village, where the land began to slope and the trees took over. His animals roamed freer than most. His house leaned ever so slightly, like even the wood had given up trying to get his attention. You walked there the next morning. Knocked once, waited, knocked again. The door creaked open just enough for a single eye to peek through. Your cow was over again, you said. He nodded, slowly, deliberately, as if confirming the weather. The fence is still open. Another nod. You waited. He didn't say a word. It needs fixing, you said, hoping to spark some movement. Silence. Eventually, he muttered. It holds well enough. You didn't shout, didn't scold. You just walked back, because anything else would have been wasted breath. And so began the quietest war you'd ever fought. You repaired the fence. Again, he removed your fix. Again. At first it was subtle. A post nudged loose, a rope mysteriously frayed. But as weeks passed, your efforts grew more creative. You used sap and pitch. He used rainwater and patience. You braced with stones. He moved the stones. Not in the open, of course. That would have been too direct. Too obvious. This was a war of slow undoing. Of quiet defiance. You stopped telling your wife. She could see it in your face anyway. The children stopped asking why there was always a new cow in the yard. Even the dog, normally so alert, stopped barking at the intruders. He just gave you a look that said, again, really. There was no resolution. Just repetition. A slow, endless loop. You mended. He ignored. The cow returned, and the fence, tired of choosing sides, began to sag from the weight of your stubbornness. It didn't break all at once. No, that would have been too dramatic. To clean. Instead, the fence wore down gradually, like an old man sighing through his joints. The posts leaned inward like gossiping elders. The rope frayed until it looked more like decorative twine. The gap widened, not with urgency, but with indifference. One afternoon, during a light rain that couldn't decide if it was mist or drizzle, you watched as two cows walked through the hole without hesitation. They didn't even glance around, like they'd come to expect an open invitation. You didn't try to stop them. What was the point? You stood there, hands on hips, the rain dripping off your nose, and realized something strange. You were no longer angry, just tired. Tired of hammering posts. Tired of dragging rope. Tired of waiting for a neighbor who would never care as much as you did. So you did something different. You went inside, sat down, ate the rest of your wife's barley cake. Let the cows wander. They trampled a bucket. They sniffed the laundry. They knocked over the firewood stack you'd finally managed to organize. You watched from the window, said nothing, because that fence, it was never really about cows. It was about the idea of order, the illusion that, if you just fixed enough things, life would stop leaking around the edges. But life doesn't work that way. Not on a Viking farm, not anywhere. So you poured yourself a mug of sour mead, leaned back, and accepted the truth. The fence had finally given up. And maybe just as maybe you should, too. It happened without words. No formal apology. No neighborly handshake. Just two tired men and a stretch of land that refused to pick sides. You built a second barrier. Not a fence. Exactly. More like a suggestion. A line of logs stacked just wide enough to keep the cows confused. 2 feet inside your own border, where no one could accuse you of trespass or pride. He said nothing. Didn't even look at it. But the cows stopped coming. Mostly, one wandered close now and then. Stared at the logs. Gave a disappointed snort, but never crossed. as if even they understood some invisible truce had been drawn. Your wife approved. She called it the compromise. You called it the last thing I'll ever build for someone else. You no longer knocked on his door. He no longer nodded from his porch. But there was peace of a kind. One day, you saw him mending a different corner of his fence. Slowly, clumsily. You didn't offer to help, he didn't ask. And that was that. No saga would ever sing of this. But in your quiet corner of the world, with your barley cake untrampled and your firewood undisturbed, that silence, that was victory.